Common Knowledge is brought to you by PureMTGO.com and InkedGaming.com. Use coupon code CCMTG10 at checkout for a 10% discount on all Inked Gaming supplies and accessories. You can support the show directly through Patreon at patreon.com/common knowledge.
This is the Common Knowledge Podcast. It's not about the cost, it's about the knowledge. Here are your hosts, Brandon Clark and Lobber.
How's it going, everybody? Welcome to episode 77 of the Common Knowledge Podcast. I am your host, Brandon, and joined with me, as always, my loyal partner in crime, the majestic, the beautiful, the bodacious Sean the Lobbert.
Jeez. What is up, Brandon?
Not a lot. What's up with you?
Not a lot. I'm really excited to get my cards that I ordered to start rolling in. You know, do you ever order cards on some website, and I'm not going to say the name until they pay me money. But orders a bunch of cards, and then just over the next few weeks, every day it's just like Christmas when you come home, because you just have bundles and bundles of cards. I ordered 400 cards.
Holy cow. Wow.
A lot of those, 300 of those are just, I'm switching out all the lands in my cube with snow lands. So I just ordered over 300 of those. And the rest are foils, my entire deck that I'm going to be playing in Vegas. Very excited.
Nice. I have had a similar experience, though on a much smaller scale. I ordered 17 cards, and they've been coming in packages for the last couple of days. So it's always fun. I get home and there's an envelope on my desk, and I'm like, yay, something else came.
See what it is.
But
do you want to get into this?
Yeah, let's do it. I'm super excited because we don't have a big announcement and we don't have a set review. We're back in business as usual with our first power rankings in 2 or 3 months, and I'm excited.
Yeah, we can get back to catching up on what's been happening with all of these are the new things that are going to affect the format, and we can actually talk about how it's actually done that in a big way, and I don't have to edit in 1,000 cards that are all brand new and I don't have the pictures saved already.
oh yeah, I'm excited to get back into things. Yeah, I think we're also gonna record a Common Coliseum episode after this too, so for you patrons, look for that. And for those of you who aren't patrons, think about becoming patrons so you can look out for that. All right, let's just start it off with our card of the week.
Card of the week.
So I chose this card of the week. It is Ephemerate. It is a single white for an instant. It says exile target creature you control, then return it to the battlefield under its owner's control. And it has rebound. Rebound, if you're not familiar, says if you cast this spell from your hand, exile it as it resolves. At the beginning of your next upkeep, you may cast this card from exile without paying its mana cost. The reason we chose this is because it is in the most powerful deck in the format right now, and it's one of the most powerful cards in that deck. It makes you afraid to kind of interact or anything because it doubles as a protection spell, and it has a lot of other things that it does.
Yeah, so we could just start a laundry list of things about this card. It costs 1 mana. It's an instant. It protects your creature. It's a combo enabler that's cheap. It's a source of card advantage to white. It acts as a combat trick in some cases, especially if you have Seeker of the Way in your deck. You get to ephemerate something else, get your value, pump your Seeker of the Way, nom something in combat. There's just so many applications of this card. There's a cool picture of Aslan in the artwork. The laundry list just goes and goes and goes.
Aslan, the lion from The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, of course.
Yeah, I got to admit, Sean wrote the Aslan line in the show notes. I said it, but I'm not going to take credit for it. That was Sean's joke.
It's fine.
I could just present it better.
The timing, you just had the timing. But the it's a source of card advantage in white, which is really really rare, and for it to be a source of card advantage in white and be so cheap, it's it's just phenomenal. Like the deck building constraints with this card are have creatures with great enter the battlefield effects. Enter the battlefield effects are better than activated abilities or anything like that because they happen immediately. So it synergizes with the best cards possible already, and just value on top of being an infinite combo with some of your dudes, where it's the combo isn't doesn't just flat out kill your opponent, but if you have like a counterspell in the graveyard, it can be that you counterspell lock them out of the game for the remainder of the game, or you just get to find an extra piece of removal each turn. In that deck, it's whatever you need it to be as long as you have the creatures to go with it.
Yeah, super powerful card. Probably the second biggest, like the second most impactful card from Modern Horizons.
Yeah, yeah, behind the obvious
Yeah,
Arkham's
Arkham's
Astrolabe. I've gotten a lot of mileage out of that picture on the YouTube. We talk about that card all the time. But some interesting interactions with this card and like the rebound mechanic. If you fizzle the spell the first time around, it won't get its rebound trigger. So like if you counter or fizzle it, then it's not you don't have to worry about that second half. So like keep that in mind when you're thinking about interacting with your opponent. And then it's not a May ability, so when this does rebound, I've had it be where my opponent is forced to flicker their attacker, which doesn't end up being that bad because a lot of times it's like a core Skyfisher and they just get an extra Arkham's Astrolabe.
It is a May ability. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may cast this card from
exile. Oh, no one has ever opted not to, even when it was at a disadvantage.
I opt to not rebound this all the time.
It's just been such like I see people flickering like their Seeker of the Way and things, and I'm like, what? I don't know if they're just like yielding when they shouldn't be, but maybe. You're right. That's a thing I just learned right now, and I think that a lot of people need to learn that. So there's a little bit of knowledge to wrap up our card of the week segment. Do you have anything else?
Yeah, it's like Liliana the Veil. Liliana's hidden ability is do nothing. Ephemerate's hidden ability is choosing not to rebound it when it's disadvantageous. Like, I want to attack you with my Seeker the Way this turn. Okay, well, let's not rebound this Ephemerate and attack you with Seeker the Way.
That's amazing. I never knew that.
Yeah, it's a May ability. You may cast this card from exile without paying its mana cost. The trick is, though, if you don't, it's still an exile. It doesn't go to the graveyard. If you don't rebound that spell, it remains in exile, which plays with your Archaeomancers and stuff. But
okay, so that might make a little more sense on why they were doing that.
Yeah, maybe they had an Archaeomancer and they felt like, oh, I want to get this back later, so I need to just rebound it now. But there are definitely a lot of situations where you don't want to rebound this. Not having a good creature or like having lethal on board and wanting to be aggressive. There are reasons to not do it. So, common knowledge for you.
You ready for the main topic?
Yes.
Main topic.
All right, so let's just jump into power rankings for July 2019. So, for those of you who are new to the show and have never seen a power rankings episode with us, because it's been a while, the way we do it is we have a points system awarded to decks that perform in pauper challenges. So we award points to the top 32 decks. Top 8, we go first, second, first place 6 points, second place 5 points, third and fourth place get 4 points, 5 through 8th get 3 points, and then all the rest of the decks from 9th to 32nd get 2 points. So we tally up all those points from the 4 challenges that happen in the month, and then we take the top 8 deck lists, and that's what our power rankings are. We're going to do some honorable mentions as well. And then, of course, if you want to see all the other decks that made appearances in the challenge, you can go to the Patreon page where Sean has a spreadsheet of all the deck lists, all their points from months all the way back from when we started doing this.
Yeah,
And
we have
that's
all of last year, and we have all of this year except for the 2 months where things were just nuts. And we think we might go back and fill in those just to get a complete look at where the format has gone over these 2 years.
Yeah. And again, you don't have to be a patron to see the graph. That's just where we keep it. We keep it on our Patreon page. Cool. Yeah, that's power rankings in a nutshell for any of you new listeners, and for our old listeners, a refresher. Okay, so let's jump into it with our top 8. So we're going to start with number 1 or number 8?
I say we start with the number 1.
Okay.
That's how we've always done it.
Yeah.
And can you guess what the number one deck is? You did these.
Are you guys guessing?
Is it Scred Delver?
Oh, is it? No, it's not. Keep guessing, listeners. What is it? What could it be?
It's the deck. It's the deck with Ephemerate in it that we were talking about at the start of the show. I mean, do we have names for these decks nailed down yet? I think we're just kind of filling in.
I'm Jeskai Snow, but I don't know. I'm also lumping them more together in. There are more control-y versions of this deck. There are more mid-range versions of this deck. There are aggressive versions with fairies and Ninja the Deep Hours. Like there's all sorts of versions of this deck, but basically what this comes down to is you are looking at a core Skyfisher Arkham's Astrolabe package as the backbone of the deck. They're all Jeskai, so they're 3 colors. Sometimes you'll see a 4th color splashed in there, like a Reaping the Graves, or I don't know, Weather the Storm in the sideboard, or like Flashback the Other Side of Ancient Grudge, kind of a thing. But they're all core Jeskai decks.
Yeah, and they have like Muldrifter, and they have the Archaeomancer to go get their Ephemerate back and kind of loop that. It's just a high value deck with a lot of roadblocks for aggressive decks.
Yeah, makes great use out of the card Scred. Having those 4 extra snow permanents is pretty nice. I mean, just as well as just the package. Core Skyfisher or Glinthawk plus Arkham's Astrolabe is just such a powerful engine. Like, I don't know, Astrolabe being a whole half a mana, like half the cost of Prophetic Prism, just makes such a huge difference for when you're chaining your Astrolabe turns, where you're just like, Skyfisher, recast Astrolabe, Glinthawk, recast Astrolabe, play in the spell I just drew, attacking for 5 with Seeker of the Way.
In my testing against Jeskai Snow, I've tested a bunch of aggressive decks because we've on Twitter we had the little interaction with Alex Ullman where it wasn't really an interaction, it was more us just replying to his post, where we were saying that aggressive decks are back in this format, and that is true, but they really do, the aggressive decks beat up on the Tron decks for sure, but I don't think that they have that great of a matchup against the Jeskai Snow deck. I don't really think anything particularly does. Maybe Tron has a decent matchup against it, but I would actually still take the leaner Snow deck.
I don't know. I'm always pretty afraid of Tron when I play this deck.
Okay. So yeah, then Tron is beating up on Snow, and then it looks like
an aggressive version. There are the more aggressive versions that I think have an edge against Tron. My version of the deck is more mid-rangey, and I beat up on the aggressive versions of the deck and the aggressive linear decks in the format, and I've had a really rough time with Tron.
Yeah, so I think I'm just going to transition into our next thing, because we're already pretty much there. Our second place deck is Marasa Tron with 40 points. So the first deck was 75, and then the next one was 40. And that, over the course of our power rankings, we've kind of noticed that this, like, the point value difference here isn't too out of the ordinary. I feel like the number 1 deck usually is pretty far out ahead. So I don't think this is cause for a lot of alarm yet. Like, the feeling of that deck is that it's super powerful, but 75 is within reason, for sure. But Marasatron, I think, is trying to beat up on Jeskai Snow as the number one deck, and it is losing to all of the other aggressive decks that are starting to pop up and come back into the meta.
Yeah. So with Marasatron, like it's gotten a few good tools to help it, I think, in this new meta. One is obviously Astrolabe itself.
Mm-hmm.
That's done a couple things for Tron. First off, it's let them just like pretty much take all the non-basics out of their deck except for Tron pieces, which has mitigated the effect that land destruction has on it. Obviously, land destruction is still fine against Tron because this is a big mana deck and they do need to hit that threshold of mana, but it's a lot harder to just cripple them because they have so many basic lands. The other thing that I think has come that's helped Tron is obviously Weather the Storm.
Yeah.
Like, it's just nutty that deck, like, it just has, like, Weather the Storm doesn't even necessarily need to be like a game-ending card for them, and that's not what its purpose is. Its purpose is just get them an extra turn, maybe two. And that's really all Tron needs to set up and then take control of a game, where in most situations an aggressive deck would be able to take advantage of Tron's sort of like meandering, okay, I'm going to play some lands, try to cast some derpy artifacts, put this mnemonic wall into play, and I died. But now they can just like, you cast 3 spells this turn, you attack me for 8, all right, end step, I'll gain 12 for 2 mana.
Yeah, and that is cheaper than your Pulse of Marasa, and it's not conditional on anything in the graveyard, because I know that a lot of decks will attack their graveyard and try to fizzle those spells. So it's not like a moment's piece either, where it has to be timed correctly and you're casting it over multiple turns. It's just like, this is going to be enough life that it blinks this combat, potentially another combat. Still, though, that's still Tron's weakness. Like, that's the tools it got, but it's not perfect. Sometimes the aggressive deck just keeps coming, and
yeah, sometimes you don't draw Weather the Storm,
Yeah,
like, and you just get got. So yeah, nothing's foolproof in this game.
Mm-hmm. It is still the biggest, baddest control deck in the format, I think, right now.
At this point, blue-black control decks like alchemy decks have just been completely erased from the map. Like,
yeah,
I haven't seen one since Modern Horizons.
Yeah, I think that's just because removal got worse. Like, every time you're removing a creature against most of these decks, you're getting 2 for 1. The aggressive decks beat up on blue-black control worse than they beat up on Marasatron, because it doesn't have those life gain tools.
Let's talk about our third place deck. We talked about this last week, and we referenced it in the Alex Ullman tweet, but basically this meta is Tron decks, and then all the variations of Jeskai Snow decks, and then aggressive linear decks. And that's going to kind of be reflected here in the top 8. So we've got Jeskai at the top, Marasatron in second place, and all the rest of our decks are pretty much aggressive linear decks.
Yeah, very much.
Oh, boy.
Our next deck has...
One of the decks on the list is a mid-range deck, technically, but we'll talk about that when we get to it and what's happening with that deck. So, yeah, do you want to talk us through our third place deck?
So, our third place deck is Affinity. It has 29 points. So, Marasatron at 40, Affinity at 29. I think that Affinity is so high on this list because it has those 4/4s. So, if something like Jeskai Snow is throwing out like a 2/3 or a 2/2, trying to 2 for 1 their opponent by trading in combat, Affinity doesn't really have to care so much. They just kind of plow through with their large creatures and outclass their opponent's creatures. That's what Affinity's great at. Additionally, Affinity is actually pretty good against these other aggressive decks, since again it's outclassing all of their creatures, and the aggressive decks can't interact with their fling combo or Teamer Battle Rage shenanigans like most of the time. Sometimes they can, of course, like Red Deck Wins and stuff has burn that they can make their opponent sack down to fewer artifacts and maybe make it not lethal and stuff. But for the most part, yeah, I think that Affinity is the way to go. The gap between it and the next deck isn't huge. I still think it's a really good choice as long as there's not... I don't think there's a whole lot of hate right now for Affinity that is super meaningful. Like, Jeskai can run like Gorilla Shaman, and Marasatron can run any kind of removal it wants, like Ancient Grudge, but a lot of the time it's too little too late, and the hate doesn't matter so much. So I just think that the size of the creatures is the most important thing right now, and what makes Affinity the best of these.
Yeah. I think I'm like pretty close to 50% against Affinity right now with Jeskai.
That's not bad.
I think this deck is all the points you mentioned. I think are just like really accurate. Like having 4/4s, a lot of 4/4s. Like they really put a tax on your spreads. And if you're just not prepared with your sideboard, I think Affinity will run you over.
Yeah, you have to like have the artifact destruction element, and then you have to have the like Hydroblast element, where you have to be able to interact with their Atog Fling. And sometimes you draw the wrong portion of that. Like, okay, I have my Hydroblasts. These 4/4s really are just running me over right now, though.
Yeah. So it was actually interesting because I played a match against Affinity where I had drawn a couple pieces of Artifact Hate, one of which was a Shenanigans, because I've been testing that card out. And I just was like blowing something up every turn. I drew my Ancient Grudge, so I blew up a couple things in a turn. And I just like always had Counterspell mana up. And so they could never really try to go for it. And then it eventually got to the point where I had killed enough of their artifacts and played enough snow permanents that I could scred their Atog. And even if they sacked their entire board, their Atog would still die. But that was like a super like convoluted. That was the exception, not the rule. Like it is tough against Affinity because they attack on multiple angles, and they just really make you have the answer. They just present really powerful questions to the format, and if you're not prepared for it in your sideboard, you probably will get run over by this deck. And even if you are, you could still just lose 0-2 easy.
So are you ready to move on to the next one?
Yeah.
Your turn to introduce it.
Alrighty, so our next deck on 28 points in 4th place is Stompy. So again, another very aggressive, very linear deck, trying to take advantage of sort of the slowness of the format. I don't know. Like,
yeah.
People are just trying to dirtle around with their Astrolabes and their Ephemerates, and if you're not doing that, the best way to do it is to just try to get under them and attack them. And Stompy does that really, really well. I think the one thing that Stompy lacks is what Sean mentioned. It's the creatures. Affinity has a ton of 4/4s for 0 and 2 mana, and Stompy has a bunch of 2/2s that get blanked by 1 mana Glinthawks and Core Skyfishers, and they get lightning bolted and they get scredded easily. And the Stompy decks are relying heavily on those combat tricks to keep their creatures alive and to push through that damage. And it's just not hard. Like a lot of decks play to spell main deck now. It's really easy to just have your creature get lightning bolted. So you've got to be really careful with your spots. This deck is super powerful, but there are a lot of tough decisions that come with playing it optimally. And I don't know if it's a deck that I would try to pick up and play myself.
No, it seems like a very high risk proposition to me of like you're gonna have to get lucky, and I've been doing some testing with aggressive decks, and there's just a lot that feels like it can go wrong. I'll say that Stompy of the aggressive decks is the one that's hardest to interact with, since your Hydroblasts aren't doing anything. They have to have actual removal spells that you can interact with your stuff that will save things, but it's worse than all of the other decks at actually attacking through a board of creatures, since you need to either combine your spell with like your creature with like a Rancor or some other spell like Mutagenic or Vines, and then you're using that Vines, I think, more aggressively than you want to be doing in like saving a creature, and then they probably will have a follow-up creature.
Yeah, I don't have a lot left to say about Stompy.
Yeah, me neither. I think I'll have more to say about it when after this next deck. So the next deck is Red Deck Wins with 24 points. So all of the aggressive decks I feel like are in this like little group here, and they're right underneath, Tron and Jeskai Snow. I think that Red Deck Wins is getting more play because Goblin Grenade obviously is a pretty good card. It can just close out games that would have been difficult otherwise. What I have been finding is that the Jeskai Snow match is pretty dang hard because of Dispel and Hydroblast, and then you don't have the ability to, like Stompy does, to pump up your creatures like more permanently with like an Elephant Guide or a Rancor. Everything is like a one-off, just go for it type of thing. And there's just so much that can go wrong if they lay down like a lone missionary and they're able to ephemerate it, or any other creature and they're able to ephemerate it. You're looking pretty bad at that point. It is nice that you have the burn spells, is like the removal spells for reach and stuff, but I don't think that overtakes something like Stompy that has those more permanent abilities to buff your creatures. I feel like even with Red Deck Wins, I think getting a boost from people trying to test out Goblin Grenade and seeing if they can, sneak out a really good win rate when this card's pretty new. Maybe not a lot of people are looking at it. The power ranking number of 24 is with that boost, so I think Red Deck Wins is gonna fall away more.
Yeah, I think this deck has a lot of, I think you touched on them all already. It's just got a lot of issues that like these other aggressive decks don't really have. It does have a few good things going for it, like the burn obviously gives it a lot of good reach, and I don't know, having like those goblin heel cutters to like make blocking hard for your opponent. There's a lot of good things about this deck, and there's like a lot of things that I just kind of see it as a worse Stompy deck.
Yeah, like the thing it has over Stompy, I guess, is that a lot of Tron decks run Stonehorn Dignitaries, and Red Deck Wins still has an out to win that game, whereas Stompy is just, I guess I'm going to keep attacking, and if they don't hit the right combination of spells and this loop stops, then I win. Red Deck Wins is like, I'm going to do that, and I'm going to hold on to Fire Blasts and Goblin Grenades until I think that I can punch him in the face for 14 or whatever.
Yeah, the burn is definitely the biggest thing that this deck has going for it. It gives the deck a lot of reach that Stompy just does not have.
Yeah, but I think the numbers pan out where Stompy is better still.
Yeah, I think it is. So that was 5th place. 6th place on 17 points, we have Boros Monarch. So this is sort of like the lone mid-range deck in this sea of linear aggressive strategies. I think that Boros Monarch is slightly worse than the Jeskai deck, as you just don't have access to as powerful of things. But what I have been seeing with Boros Monarch, looking through all these deck lists, are they are becoming more aggressive. They're moving away from being grindy mid-range decks to being more aggressive. So one card that I've seen gain a lot of popularity is Ardent Recruit, which is a 1-mana 1/1 with Metalcraft, and it gets +2/+2, so 1 mana 3/3. Court Homunculus is also seeing play in these decks, which is a 1-mana 1/1 that gets +1/+1 if you control another artifact. So they're playing just a lot of more aggressive creatures. A lot of lists I'm seeing are cutting Palace Sentinels completely from their deck. Yeah. So they're like, I don't know, they're almost just moving to a Boros Metalcraft deck.
Like, I think they have to. I think the logic with this deck is that you still have those tough creatures for aggressive decks to deal with, so you've got that covered. You just got a little bit more advantage than them on that front, and then you want to be more aggressive than, well, much more aggressive than Tron or Jeskai Snow, so that you can close out those games, and you've got a battle plan for the whole meta. I think you're still gonna have a hard time with affinity decks, which, if that's your bad matchup, it's a little bit more manageable. And then you do have a battle plan against Jeskai Snow and Marasatron, but they are capable of out-advantaging you, and if you can't kill them quick enough, then you're gonna lose there. So I see this trend of that deck being more aggressive, as I think that's going to keep going. I think they're going to get more and more aggressive.
Yeah. I mean, we could even start seeing us go back to like Kuldaltha Boros Bully type strategies. You know,
I think
Trickery is getting less popular. Or I think Electrickery right now is the worst it's ever been.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
I mean, like Affinity doesn't do anything against that deck. Doesn't do anything against Marasatron. Doesn't do anything against these Jeskai decks. It's fine against red deck wins. They still have a lot of 1 mana 2/2s and bears and stuff. Stompy, it doesn't kill anything. You know, maybe like this is a time where someone could just like put together a really strong Kuldaltha Boros or like Boros Bully strategy and just like kind of just go wide and go around.
I think the problem is that
and stuff.
Electrickery is at its worst point, yes, but people aren't going to be taking him out of their sideboards. They're still going to be prepared.
Yeah, that's probably true. Alrighty, should we move along to 7th place?
Yeah, 7th place is, I think, where our combo decks start finally coming in at the bottom of the meta. We've got Elves with 16 points.
Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, strict combo decks, I think at this point are pretty much dead. The only one that's really left in our meta is like familiars. Outside of like these more aggro combo decks. Because I mean, there's no.
Yeah. Yeah, we've called Affinity a combo deck, and I would say that that's true. And Marasatron is also a combo deck, and I guess Jeskai Snow has its combo with Ephemerate. So like dedicated combo decks are definitely waning, but we've just worked it into our other decks, where I think it functions the best anyway. But yeah, Elves. It seems rough for Elves right now. Like more Searing Blazes.
Yeah, I would not want to be playing Elves in this metagame right now. I think that Elves, I think that what we're seeing here, though, with it making an appearance on our power rankings, is just sort of ode to the power of Winding Way. These decks, I think, have just gotten much more streamlined, much more powerful. They've cut blue. You know, they took all the bad cards out of their deck so that they don't have to try to enable Distant Melody anymore. You know, like the deck doesn't have its super explosive, like crazy elf turns anymore, where it's just like, oh, my opponent drew 40 cards and cast their entire deck, and it was a 15-minute turn. That doesn't really exist anymore, you know, because you just can't chain Winding Way the way you could chain a Distant Melody into another Distant Melody or whatever.
Yeah.
But they've just become more consistent. Their mana is good. They don't have to have that bad 1/1 for 2 that goes and tutors a land in their deck anymore.
Yeah.
You know? So it's funny because the deck got a definite power boost with Winding Way, but this is a very hostile environment for Elves right now.
I don't have anything more on Elves specifically. Do you want to talk about the decks tied for 8th place?
Yep. So 7th and 8th place, we have a 2-way tie on 13 points between Boggles and Mono White Heroic.
So again, I would classify these as combo decks, since you need
in the
two
combo
halves.
aggro strategy.
Yeah, and they're also doing the same thing. I think that both of them, I think, are going to be weak to those Marasatron decks, since they have access to Stonehorn Dignitary and can just flat out blank them. I don't think there's anything wrong with Boggles right now, though. Like, the amount of counter magic in the meta is really low, and I think that's when Boggles tends to do the best. Like, if they should be able to beat up on the aggro strategies by just outclassing everything and maybe getting a lifelinker online.
Yeah. If I was going to choose a non-Astrolabe deck to play in a tournament, I would probably choose Boggles or Affinity. Boggles has like a lot of powerful tools to beat up on all the other linear decks. Like, I just can't imagine being red deck wins trying to beat an Armadillo Cloak. Like, that doesn't sound like a thing. And, the Jeskai decks only have 4 copies of Counterspell. I actually don't believe that the Jeskai decks have a great matchup with Boggles. And there's not enchantment hate running around in sideboards right now. So, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if next month on our power rankings, we saw Boggles much higher on this list. So I do think that is just kind of the way this format is now. The Tron decks and the Jeskai decks are just known quantities. And I think that if you're not playing that deck, your key to success, we talked about this last week, is finding the aggressive deck that's like suited to the current meta. And like right now, I think that is Boggles. I don't think that people are prepared enough for it. I think that you could pick it up and you can have a lot of success with it right now. But that could easily change when, people just start throwing tons of enchantment hate into their sideboards. And then at that point, you think, well, okay, maybe I need to pick Affinity up again or go for Stompy or whatever. So,
and it's not like
I was just going to say, I think we're going to see a lot of fluctuation in the 6th through 8th place decks. I think that Jeskai and Tron are going to stay at the top 2, and
3rd through 8th place.
Oh yeah, sorry, 3rd through 8th place. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if one of the aggressive decks kicked Tron out of 2nd place.
Yeah.
But I think for the most part, we're going to see that, and then we're going to see a huge fluctuation on what all these linear aggressive decks are doing.
Yeah, I think I agree 100%. And I will note that Boggles got a pretty decent boost with Arkham's Astrolabe as well, that I don't know if a lot of people are talking about. I've been seeing these Boggles lists playing Core Skyfisher and Arkham's Astrolabe. They already have the abundant growth, so there's plenty of things to bounce with your Core Skyfisher, and it gives you a little bit more insurance against all the aggressive decks. That's an alternate win con of just like, well, you don't seem like the kind of deck that's going to be shooting my guys. Now I'll just put all my stuff on this flyer. Have a great day.
Yeah, I've been seeing that too. It's sort of funny. When I first saw it, I was like, what's going on here? But, I mean, it's powerful. It's just such a powerful combination of cards. And it's so almost just free to put into your deck. Like,
yeah,
no downside, really.
And then, I don't know, do you want to talk about how, is this just heroic in the same place for the same reasons? I do always think that it's just a worse Boggles deck. If it had a plus, I would say, is that heroic still gains bonuses when they're countering your spells, but we were just saying counterspells aren't very popular right now. I think Affinity is definitely getting a boost off of the lack of counterspells outside of like Jeskai Snow. Like that, I think that and Tron are the only things that I can think of with counterspells right now.
Yeah, that's it. And they have 4 copies of Counterspell, maybe a copy of Dispel out of the Jeskai decks. Same with the Tron decks. Dispel doesn't do a lot against Heroic because, like we said, like they get the trigger if you counter the spell or not, and Counterspell is just slow and clunky.
Yeah.
But I do think that Heroic is just like a worse Boggles deck. I just think it's a little less consistent. I think that Boggles is better. I don't know if you could actually start fitting in Core Skyfisher and Astrolabe and Heroic too. Like, try to make that more consistent. I don't know.
That seems like a little bit much, but Astrolabe is always surprising me. I feel like if it doesn't have the function of actually giving you colors, then it's not, like, I don't like it in monocolor decks. If we start seeing that, that'll be some crazy times we're living in.
Yeah, man, some crazy stuff going on. All right, so that is our top 8. Those were our power rankings for July. We got a couple of honorable mentions, decks that didn't make the top 8. In this case, they were decks that weren't even close to the top 8. 2 decks on this list that I think were worth noting just for the dominance that they've had in this format up until now, and 1 deck because I think it's funny. So our first honorable mention is Defender's Combo. So for those who aren't familiar with the Defender's Combo deck, It's an infinite mana combo using Axebane Guardian, which says add X mana in any combination of colors to your mana pool, where X is the number of creatures you control with Defender, along with a bunch of defenders. And then the card Galvanic Alchemist, which allows you to basically just go infinite if you have more than 4 defenders in play. And then your win condition is Bloodright Invoker. 8 generic mana, target player loses 3 life, and you gain 3 life.
And it's like it's a creature?
Yeah, it's a 3/1 vampire for 2 and a black.
Oh, I guess they'd rather have it say lose life than the red one that deals damage. Just it's easier to get around
and stuff, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, prismatic strands or whatever, yeah.
Oh yeah, prismatic strands. But then this deck also has like a single copy of Strider Harness, which is a 3 mana artifact with the equip cost of 1. It gives your creature +1/+1, but that's not the relevant part. It gives your creature haste, so you kind of have the ability to win out of nowhere.
Yeah,
which is funny. But I don't think the Strider Harness is super necessary. Like that's just really slow 3 mana.
For that deck, 3 mana is not that much. And
yeah, I guess
it could. I think it would pay off and generate more mana than that a lot of the time. So it adds.
Yeah. And then you got like Drift of Phantasms, which is a 0/5 defender for 2 and a blue, but it has Transmute. So you can go find a 3-drop, which is your Bloodright Invoker and your Galvanic Alchemist, which are your combo pieces. The Axebane Guardian is also a 3-drop. So yeah, just sort of a funny deck that I wanted to highlight. Top 32 power rankings. The last 2 decks we're going to talk about are Mono Blue Delver and Scred Delver, which each had a total of 5 points.
And that 5 points would have had to have been a deck with 2 points and a deck with 3 points each, right?
Yep. So they both had 1 top 8 finish and 1 top 32 finish.
And then I see that there's a list with 2 points that says blue red Scred. Do you know if that one had Delvers in it? Because
no,
I just thought it was. I was thinking it was notable that in a month of pauper challenges, 8 Delvers, like not 8, but somewhere in that number, 8 to 16 Delvers actually top 32'd. That's like a weird upside down world that this time last year I would have never been able to predict. I mean, this time last year we were super excited because Gitu Lava Runner was coming out and Burn was like catching up, and it immediately got like smacked down. But those 2 decks were just dominating, like as always, and now they're like, no, you really don't have to worry about, Delver of Secrets being a card at all. There's better cards. Why doesn't your Delver of Secrets draw a card?
Yep. I think we've mentioned it on the podcast. I know I tweeted about it really early on, like maybe a week after these Jeskai decks started popping up, and I was just like, Delver's unplayable. It is a mistake to put this card in your deck.
Yeah.
Don't do it. So I thought that was a good thing to highlight, that, yeah, this format has been completely turned upside down by Modern Horizons.
Yep.
All right, well, cool. That was the show. We do have one small announcement in regards to our Patreon and the way we're going to structure our stretch goals. So we had a $50 stretch goal set, and we're going to actually change that. We don't want to focus on the dollar amounts anymore. We want to focus on community growth. And so for our stretch goal, we're going to do 15 patrons. So we're at 13 right now. So 2 more patrons, and we'll be able to do our 5-card blind stretch goal. And then we'll set our next stretch goal with a patron number in mind. So the idea being, Sean and I are a lot less concerned with like how much money we're actually getting. Like, if you can just donate $1, that's great. If you can donate $5, that's awesome. What we're more focused on is like building up this common knowledge community, which already is great and is growing. You can find like tons of good exchanges happening on like our Facebook page, and there are new people there. Like every time a post, there's always a new person. Like, I don't recognize this person, so that's awesome. But yeah, that's what we want to focus on. We want to focus on community growth, and so we're changing our stretch goals to numbers. So once we hit 15 patrons, we'll do the 5-card blind tournament. We're 2 patrons away, so there's that. And then we'll set our next stretch goal with probably like 20 to 25 patrons as the goal. But yeah, so that's what's going to be happening.
End times.
Thanks everyone for listening to this week's episode of Common Knowledge. If you like the show and would love to find a way to give back, you can do so at patreon.com/common knowledge. There you're going to get access to all of our great Patreon perks, the Common Coliseum, as well as be eligible for our Card of the Week drawing. Also available at the Patreon page is our spreadsheet that Sean keeps with all of the power rankings from past months. That is available to every listener. So even if you're not a patron, you can find that there. Thank you to our sponsors, puremtgo.com. Thank you to our sponsors, puremtgo.com and inkgaming.com. Use that coupon code CCMTG10 to get yourself a 10% discount on all inked gaming supplies and accessories. And don't forget to check us out on YouTube. Hit up the Constructive Criticism YouTube page for all sorts of amazing Magic the Gathering content. And if you're watching us on YouTube now, don't forget to give us a like and subscribe and all that other fun YouTube stuff. If you'd like to get in contact with us, you can do so at commonknowledgemtg@gmail.com. Submit all of your questions, comments, concerns, whatever it is. We love getting listener emails. And lastly, if you'd like to find the show on Twitter, you can do so at CK Podcast MTG. We're also on Facebook. We've got an awesome group. Just search for Common Knowledge. You can find that there. You can find me on Twitter at bclark_CK. And Sean, if the lovely listeners would like to find you, where can they do so?
They can find me on Twitter at Lobbert8. That is LOBBERT and the number 8. They can also find me on YouTube if they just search for Lobbert, where I have, separate from the podcast, a whole bunch of my own videos where I play through brews and decks that I think are good or I'm testing when I have time. That's all we have, so have a good week.
Bye forever.